Russia claims that it's nearly achieved the objectives of its special military operation and that it has no intention of negotiating with Kiev. Is this just Russian bluster? And is there a real reason the Russians are talking about tapping out? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is from TASS, the Russian government news agency. So this is official Russian government agency that says that Russia is now close to achieving its special military operations goals, at least according to their intelligence chief. He said in an interview with, again, a Russian super pro-Russian magazine, he says, quote, "The situation on the front lines is not in Kiev's favor. We, the Russians, hold the initiative in all areas and are close to achieving our goals, while the Ukrainian armed forces are on the verge of collapse and the Zelensky regime has lost its legitimacy, along with the ability to make agreements." And so this is interesting because it says a couple of statements. First off, again, I was in Ukraine just 3 weeks ago, didn't really see an armed force on the verge of collapse. Again, the Ukrainian strategy is that of attrition. So it involves baiting the Russians to continually make advances. In fact, if the Russians were to stop advancing, it would actually be harder for Ukraine to inflict the level of casualties they're trying to inflict. Now, the other thing is that saying that the Zelensky government is illegitimate is absolutely comical, given the fact that, again, Putin has been a dictator for 20 plus years, despite ostensibly being elected. So saying that, the Kiev government is illegitimate. But the really thing you should take away from this is says that it's lost its legitimacy along with the ability to make agreements, which Russia is saying, we are not going to negotiate. We don't feel the need to negotiate because the Ukrainians we're already going to win militarily. Now, then he goes on to repeat some Russian propaganda points. All attempts to create instability of Russia have failed. He says, quote, "People understand we're not fighting against just the Kiev junta, but against the collective West. Our freedom and sovereignty are at stake." Again, the West's goal is to impose a war of attrition on us, the great Russian people, and create conditions for a color revolution. Right? They're also putting out this talking point that says that the West wants the Ukrainians to fight until the last Ukrainian, and once there are no Ukrainians left, they'll make the Baltic nations, the Eastern Europeans, and then the Germans fight against the scary Russian bear. Right? They say the globalists have already use their technologies to brainwash common people and put pressure on local elites. So this is all very troubling stuff. But first, and before we talk about why I think this is all BS, I want to mention, first off, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I see that about 90% of you guys that watch aren't subscribed. And it does make a difference for me. It makes a difference in terms of negotiating with sponsors. So if you can hit that subscribe button, it doesn't mean that you're going to get like a gazillion videos flooding across your feed. Just helps me out. Second, though, if you want to help me out even more and get access to uncensored combat footage that's sent to me straight from the front lines, including a growing number of videos sent to me by the units that I made contact with in Ukraine, you're going to want to go to combatvetnews.com. This is my version of Patreon, where you can sign up, become a member, and for just a couple bucks a month, you can help keep me independent and get access to hundreds at this point of uncensored combat videos dating back to the start of the war. So if you're interested in seeing probably one of the largest archives of this war's evolution, that's where you're going to want to go, combatvetnews.com. And again, the link's in the description. I appreciate all you guys that support me over there. Okay. So while it is true that in a lot of places, the Russians are advancing, right? This is part of their objective. Particularly right now, they're trying to take Pokrovsk, again, seizing what is relatively extensive parts of territory. But you can see that the territory itself is not particularly valuable, right? Russia's using land seized as its metric, but look at the land that they're seizing here, right? You're talking about empty fields. These are things that the Ukrainians are just saying, listen, we're not going to die in a bunch of empty fields. We're not going to allow our people to get cooked here. And you can see that the Ukrainians literally, the Russians aren't advancing anywhere. Anywhere of substance. You can see this ring of towns here from Shevchenko to Suky Yar. Ukrainians are dug in there, and again, they're also canalizing Russian forces. Again, if their goal is to encircle Pokrovsk, then having them turn south is not necessarily achieving that objective. So while Russia, if you use the metric of land seized, Russia has the initiative. If you use the metric of casualties inflicted, Ukraine has the initiative. So it is just a matter of strategic differences. And here's the thing. If you can make the same arguments that Russia is making on the other side. Why? Because the Russian military is failing to replace its losses by at least one estimate, right? We can infer, because you know how much, this is from Medusa. We've talked about this in an earlier video, but I want to bring it home because it's really important. The Ukrainian strategy is to get Russia to run out of people. So the question is Russia running out of people to sustain these combat operations? The answer appears to be yes, right? The Russian federal budget includes a byline of how much they've spent on sign-on bonuses for contract soldiers. And that it appears that while the total bonus amount is rising, the actual payouts are declining, which means that fewer people are signing on the dotted line. A lot fewer people are signing on the dotted line, despite the fact that each person is going to get a larger check. And so the thinking is that this infers a potentially as big as an 80% reduction from their all-time high last year or earlier in Q1. That reduction in available troops may portend the fact that Russia just cannot generate the manpower to sustain these losses. And the larger Russian offensive efforts incur larger losses. Some estimates put Russian casualties at around 2,000 a day, which is an absolutely preposterous amount for a war of attrition. Again, Medusa's estimate is thinking that Russia could reach, Russia currently is reporting about 50,000 troops that they've brought in Q4, which when you do the math here, again, if you're talking about 50,000 troops that they've verified in Q4, and you're dividing that by the 3 months, you get 16,000 troops a month. Here's the problem. What happens when you lose 1,500 troops a day in a 30-day month? You need 45,000 to replace them. So Russia's only recruiting about a third of the new troops that it needs. So again, for Russia, this may be more cope than they're letting on. Russia may say, listen, we may just plant a flag in the ground and declare the special military operation over because the Russian army can't sustain this level of forward operations. And so this may be less about Russia claiming that they're totally about to win you guys, and instead be a function of the fact that Russia itself is like running out of willing bodies. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Huge thank you to the folks like Bill Collier, Robert Kohlberg, Gars Martin, Gina Cresta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karius, AL90, Petra Taru, as well as all of our lieutenant tier members. Could not do it without you guys. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.